Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Mary and today I'm going to show you how to crochet a baby ghost. It's a pretty quick project to work up and it's super cute and absolutely perfect for the upcoming spooky season. In this tutorial I'll be using US terms. I will also be using a yarn needle, some stuffing, fabric scissors, and a stitch marker. The stitch marker is not really mandatory, but I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're just starting out. I'm also using a 7mm hook, and for yarn I'm using a number 6 super bulky yarn in white and a little bit of a number 4 worsted weight yarn in pink for the blush. For the eyes, I'm using 18mm safety eyes, but if you don't have that, you can totally replace them with a similar size or even make them out of buttons, felt, or even yarn. So now that we have everything we need, let's get started. So first we're going to take our white yarn and we are going to make a magic circle. If you don't remember how to make a magic circle, start by pinching the yarn between your thumb and pointer finger and then wrap it around the pointer and the middle finger, making an X. Then take your hook and go underneath that X and grab that lower strand of yarn over the middle finger. So you are seeing me struggle a little bit to grab that yarn, so that's just what I'm doing. Just ignore that. But now that I have it, pull it underneath the X and then go back over the X and grab that yarn again and pull it through the loop on your hook. Now that we have our magic circle, we can start on round 1. For round 1, we're going to be doing 7 single crochets inside of the magic circle. So let's start by inserting our hook into the magic circle and making a single crochet. So that's 1 single crochet. Let's do it again to make 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now that we have our single crochets, we can tighten up the magic circle by pulling on that yarn end, and we are done with round 1. Before we continue, let's add a stitch marker to the last stitch that we just made, and now we can start our round 2. For round 2, we're going to be making an increase in all 7 stitches, making a total of 14 stitches. So let's start by going through that first stitch and making 1 single crochet, and then another single crochet in that same exact stitch. This is how we make an increase. So now we're going to do the same thing in the second stitch. Make 2 single crochets, 1, 2, and that's an increase. And then again in the third stitch, 1 single crochet, 2 single crochet to make an increase. And then in the fourth stitch, again 2 single crochets, 1, 2, again in the fifth stitch, increase by making 2 single crochets. There's the second one. And then again, increase by making 2 single crochets. And then lastly, we're on the 7th stitch, so let's remove that stitch marker. And again, we're going to be making 2 single crochets to make an increase. So 1, 2. So we should now have 14 stitches total. Let's make sure by counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And we are done with round 2. So before we start on round 3, let's place a stitch marker into the last stitch that we just made. For this round, we are going to be doing 1 single crochet and then an increase, and we're going to repeat this 7 times for a total of 21 stitches. So let's start. So let's start by making 1 single crochet in the first stitch. And then in the second stitch, we're going to be increasing by making 2 single crochets in that second stitch. So we're going to repeat this again, and we're going to be making 1 single crochet in the third stitch. And then in the next stitch, we're going to be making 2 single crochets to make an increase. So there's 1, and then 2. In the next stitch, again, we're going to be making 1 single crochet. And then the one after that, again, we're going to make an increase and making 2 single crochets. 1, 2. And then again, we're going to repeat by making 1 single crochet in the next stitch. And then we're going to make 2 single crochets to make an increase in the stitch following that. Again, let's make 1 single crochet, And then we're going to make 2 single crochets to make an increase in the stitch following that one. Again, let's make 1 single crochet, followed by an increase by making 2 single crochets in the next stitch. So one last time, let's make a single crochet in the first stitch, and then we're going to remove that stitch marker and we're going to make an increase in the next stitch by making 2 single crochets. So we are done with round 3 and we should have a total of 21 stitches. We can count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. That's exactly how many we want, and we are now finished with round 3. So again, before we start on round 4, let's add our stitch marker to the last stitch that we just made. For round 4, we're going to be making 1 single crochet in every single stitch, and we should be left again with 21 stitches total. So let's begin. Let's start by making 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in the second stitch, 1 single crochet in the third stitch, 1 single crochet in the fourth stitch, 1 single crochet in the fifth stitch, and so on. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and now that we're on the last stitch, let's remove our stitch marker and we're going to make 1 single crochet in that 21st stitch. So again, we should be left with 21 stitches total. So that is the end of round 4, but for the next 5 rounds, we're going to be doing the exact same thing. So for rounds 5 to 9, we're going to be doing 1 single crochet in every single stitch for a total of 21 single crochets, just like what we just did earlier. If you personally find it more helpful to have me counting with you, then go ahead and rewind to the last round that we just did for round 4, and basically just do that 5 more times. Otherwise, go ahead and finish those next 5 rounds on your own, and I will meet you here for round 10. Welcome back. So now that we're finished, we should have 9 rounds total. So let's make sure we have that by counting from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you also have 9 rounds total, then that's perfect, and we can start on the 10th round. So as always, before we start, let's place our stitch marker in the last stitch that we just made in the previous round. So the 10th round is going to be a little bit different. We are only going to be crocheting in the front loop only. So if you're not sure what that means, basically every stitch has a front loop and a back loop. As you can see, each stitch is made of 2 strands of yarn. One is the front loop and one is the back loop. The front loop is the one that I'm pulling at right now with my right hand, and the back loop is this one. So front loop, back loop. Basically the back loop is the one on the inside of the circumference of the circle, and the front loop is on the outside. So usually when you're crocheting, you would put your hook through both loops, just like that, right? And that's how you would make a single crochet. But when we are doing crocheting in front loop only, we would only go halfway through that stitch. So basically we would find that hole between the back loop and the front loop, and we would insert our hook only through the front loop. So it'll come out the middle of the stitch, just like that, and basically we'll completely ignore the back loop, only go for the front loop, and then just yarn over and complete our single crochet or any other stitch you're doing, just like usual. So we're going to be doing that for the entire round, no matter what stitch we're doing. So for the pattern for this round, we are actually doing 1 single crochet for the first stitch, just like we just did in the front loop only, and then in the second stitch we're actually going to be doing 2 double crochets. Again, these double crochets will only be in the front loop only, just like we did with the single crochet. So if you are familiar with a lot of other tutorials or patterns, a lot of them will usually tell you to do a chain before transitioning into a double crochet. I'm not going to do that though for this pattern, just because personally I kind of prefer how it looks better without the chain. So I'm just going to go directly into the double crochet. So if you don't know how to do a double crochet, start by wrapping the yarn around the hook. Then you're going to take the hook and insert it into the stitch. This should be the second stitch in this round, because remember in the first stitch we already did our 1 single crochet. But remember, we're only doing the front loop only in this round, so only go for that first loop. Now you should have 3 loops on your hook. Then yarn over. You should again have 3 loops on your hook, and then we're going to yarn over, but only pull it through those first 2 loops. Now you should have 2 loops on your hook, and we're going to yarn over again and pull it for those last 2 loops. So that's how you do a double crochet. So we're going to do this again to make a second double crochet in the same exact stitch. So wrap your yarn around your hook, insert your hook into that front loop only of the second stitch of the round, yarn over. You should have 3 loops on your hook, then yarn over again and pull the yarn through the first 2 loops on the hook, and then again for the last 2 loops on the hook. So now let's move on to the third stitch. For this one, we're going to be doing a slip stitch again in the front loop only. So insert your hook into that front loop only, and then to do a slip stitch is basically like doing a single crochet but only halfway. So pull that yarn through, and instead of yarning over again, just pull that yarn you just pulled through the loop on your hook. That's how you do a slip stitch. So we're going to repeat this pattern again 6 more times. So basically it's going to be a single crochet in the first stitch, 2 double crochets in the second stitch, and then a slip stitch in the third stitch. So let's start again by doing a single crochet in the front loop only. Then we're going to move on to the second stitch and do 2 double crochets. There's 1, so again, 1 more double crochet. And then now in the third stitch, we're going to do a slip stitch. So again, we're going to do the same thing. In the first stitch, in the front loop only, we're going to do 1 single crochet. In the second stitch, in the front loop only, we're going to do 2 double crochets. There's 1, and now our second double crochet. And then in the third stitch, in the front loop only, we're going to do a slip stitch. So again, in the first stitch, we're doing a single crochet. In the second stitch, we're going to be doing 2 double crochets. There's our first one, and then our second one. There you go. And then in the third stitch, we're going to be doing a slip stitch. So again, in that front loop only, starting with a single crochet in that first stitch, and then in the front loop only, doing 2 double crochets in that second stitch. There's our first one, and then our second one. And then now that we're done, in the third stitch, doing a slip stitch in that front loop only. So just a few more times, again, starting with a single crochet in the first stitch, and then 2 double crochets in the second stitch. Don't forget, it should all be in the front loop only for the entire round. And then a slip stitch in the third stitch. So this is the last one we have to do. So again, starting with a single crochet in the first stitch, and then 2 double crochets in the second stitch. Again, remember everything is in front loop only for this entire round. And then finally, let's remove that stitch marker and we can do our final slip stitch in that front loop only of the third stitch. And when you're finished with that, if you turn your ghost around, you should have the little frills for your ghost now. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to crochet in the back loops only of the previous round. So you know how last round we only crocheted in the front loop only? This time we're going to find those back loops that we left behind and crochet in those back loops only. And the pattern what we're going to be doing is going to be 1 single crochet and 1 decrease. We should be left with 14 stitches at the end. So let's start. We're going to go for that first back loop and just do a normal single crochet. The only difference is you're just going through that back loop only. And then we're going to go for the second and the third loop to do a decrease. And then you're just going to pull the working yarn through both of those loops. And then again through the 2 loops on the hook. Again, we're going to do a single crochet, and then in the next 2 loops, we're going to do a decrease, pull the yarn for those 2 loops, and then again for the 2 loops on the hook. Here's another single crochet, and then another decrease by going for the next 2 loops, pulling a yarn through, and then again for the 2 loops on the hook. Another single crochet in the back loop only, and then going for the next 2 loops, pull the yarn for the 2 loops, and then again for the 2 loops on the hook. Again, do a single crochet, and then decrease by going for the next 2 loops. Again, let's do a single crochet, and then do a decrease by going for the next 2 loops. Again, we're going to do a single crochet, and then lastly, we're going to take the stitch marker off, and we're going to finish with 1 last decrease. You should have 14 stitches left. Also, by the way I do decreases is the invisible decrease method. The only difference with this one and how it normally is done is that there is no front loop, so I'm just doing it in the back loop. So before we completely close up our ghost, let's give it some eyes and some blush and some stuffing. So I'm using 18mm safety eyes, and the eyes should be between round 5 and 6, around 4 stitches apart. So let's count our rounds starting from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the eyes should go right under this round. So basically between 5 and 6, we can insert our eye. I think I want to place the eye a little bit more over to the left. So I'm just making sure that it's still between round 5 and 6, even though I moved it. And it is. And now we're going to place our second eye. Our second eye should be 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches apart from the other eye. So again, it should be 4 stitches apart, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we're happy with how the eyes look, we can grab our backings and secure the eyes in place. Now that the eyes are secured, let's grab our pink yarn so we can do the blush. I usually cut around 8 inches of the yarn. And we're going to do this twice because there's a blush on each side of the face. Let's go ahead and grab our yarn needle. So usually when you're working with a thinner yarn like the kind I'm using for the blush, you do want to use a smaller needle. But because our ghost is made out of the thicker yarn, then it's totally okay for us to be using the thicker needle as well, which personally I find a lot easier to use. So let's go ahead and thread that needle, and then we're going to go inside of the ghost and work outwards. I like to put the blush directly underneath the eye, so between round 6 and 7, and basically starting at the outer corner of the eye. So that's where I'm going to push out my needle, and I usually like to make the blush around 1 stitch wide. So I'm going to return my needle back into the plush around 1 stitch away from where I exited. And then I'm going to go over it again 2 more times, making 3 layers total. This is just a thickness that I personally prefer for my blush, but you can adjust it based on how you like it. So there we go, we have 1 blush done, so let's go ahead and do the second blush, grab our strand of yarn and thread it through the needle. So basically we're going to do the exact same thing, so again, go directly underneath the eye at the outer corner and push out that needle, and we're going to go again 1 stitch wide. And then layer it again 2 more times to make 3 layers total. So if you like the placement of your blush, we can go ahead and secure it. We can do this by turning the ghost inside out and then tying the yarn ends together. Once we're done, we can flip it back around, and now we can move on to stuffing. So let's grab our stuffing, and again, let's take a little bit at a time and fill up our little ghost. Again, it's easier if you use little bits at a time because it helps to shape out your ghost better. You can also use your fingers to gently press the stuffing into the ghost. That way you can kind of shape what you want the stuffing to be like. So once you're happy with the stuffing, we're going to do the last round of the body and close it up. For this last round, we're just going to be doing 7 invisible decreases, which will leave us with 7 stitches at the end of the round. So if you don't know how to do an invisible decrease, you could totally do the regular decrease method as well. I just personally prefer the invisible decrease. And how you do an invisible decrease is you just go for the front loop only of the 2 stitches. So let's start. Go into the front loop only of the first stitch and the front loop only of the second stitch. And then we're going to yarn over through both of those loops, and then again for the 2 loops on our hook. So we're going to repeat this 6 more times. Again, go into that front loop only of the first and the second stitch, and then yarn over again. That's 2, so 5 more times. Again, going for the front loop only of the first stitch and the second stitch, pull the yarn through both of those stitches, yarn over again, that makes 3. So again, the same thing, into the front loop only, into the front loop only, pull the yarn through both of those stitches. Oops, sometimes it's a little bit tricky, especially when the yarn is tight. So we're going to yarn over, that makes 4. And then we're going to do another invisible decrease. So again, for the front loop only of the next 2 stitches. And then we're going to do 2 more. Again, for the front loop only. And the front loop only. Yarn over through both of those stitches. And then last one, our last invisible decrease. Yay, now we're done. So we should have 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. So now we can fasten off. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the yarn through the loop and then directly through. Leave honestly a good amount, I would say, for sewing up later, maybe around a foot or more. Cut that off. And you might have some space left after doing this last round, so go ahead and fill that up with stuffing if you need to. When you're happy with the stuffing, we can now sew up the hole on the bottom of our plushie. So grab your yarn needle, thread your yarn through it, and we're just going to thread around the stitches of the circumference of the opening. So start by inserting the needle in for the first stitch, and then out for the second stitch, and then in through the third stitch, out through the fourth stitch, in through the 5th stitch, out through the 6th stitch, in through the 7th stitch, and then we're just going to pull on it and that should close up the hole. And then I sometimes like to do a few more stitches if I feel like there's anywhere that I could use another stitch to close up any holes. Once you're happy with that, we can secure the yarn. So usually I like to go through a close by spot in the body and leave a little bit of slack in the yarn so I can pull the needle through that loop. And then we're going to push the needle through, pull that yarn through and tighten it. And that should secure it. But just in case, I like to make sure it's extra secure by tying a few knots on the yarn. I usually do this a few times until I feel like the knot is big enough, and then I use the needle to pull the knot through the plushie. If you have any extra yarn sticking out, go ahead and cut that. I didn't have any because my yarn was super short, but that's the last step and we are done with the body. To make our arms, we're going to start again with a magic circle, so pinch your yarn between your thumb and pointer finger and wrap that yarn making an X around the pointer and middle finger. Then we're going to take our hook, insert it underneath the X, grab the yarn over the middle finger, pull it underneath the X, and then go over the X, grab the yarn again and pull it through the loop on the hook. Now that we have our magic circle, we're going to make 4 single crochets inside of the magic circle. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Tighten up your magic circle. And then for round 2, we're just going to be making 1 single crochet in each stitch, making 4 single crochets total. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's all the crocheting we're doing for the arm, but if your arm is turned inside out like mine is, make sure to turn it the right way around. The yarn end should be hanging out from the inside of the arm, not the outside. So now let's fasten off, grab that working yarn, pull it through the loop on the hook, pull that yarn through, I would say cut at least a foot or more, and we're going to use that yarn for sewing the arm onto the body later. And then repeat this process one more time to make a second arm. After you finish your 2 arms, it's time to attach it to the body. So if you want to stuff your arms, you can. I usually don't just because the arms are really small, and since I'm using the really plush blanket yarn, if I tuck the yarn ends in, it usually is already plenty stuffed that way. But again, you can add stuffing based on whatever you think is needed for your own ghost. So now let's attach our arms. Grab our yarn needle and thread the yarn through the needle. And how I'll place my arms is I'll go 1 stitch directly below the blush, and then I'll push my yarn needle diagonal outwards so it exits 1 stitch from the outer corner of the blush. Pull that needle through, and then you can kind of play with where you want the arm to be, and after you're pretty happy with the placement, you can hold that arm in place and kind of sew it on in a circle, attaching the arm to the body. So I'm just working in a circle, pushing the needle through the body, and then through the last layer of stitches for the arm. And we're just going to keep repeating that until we get all the way around the whole arm. Once we get all the way around, I usually like to go over it a second time just to make sure that it is extra secure. Once it's fully secure, we can finish off. So pull that needle through a nearby spot and leave a little bit of slack so we can pull the needle through the slack. And then pull tight. And then for extra security, again, I like to knot the yarn a few times. And then we're going to use our needle to pull the knot through the body of our ghost so we can hide the knot. So my yarn broke, so it kind of just automatically cut it for me, but if you do have excess yarn still sticking out, make sure to cut that off. So we're at the final step. We're going to attach our last arm, and again we're just going to repeat the same thing as we did on the other side. We're going to go one stitch underneath the blush and then push our needle diagonal so it exits one stitch away from the outer corner of the blush. And then just like before, we're going to work in a circle and connect that last round of stitches on the arm to the body. And then secure the yarn just like we did before. And we are done. Congratulations, you made a baby ghost. Let me know in the comments what you named it and what other tutorials you'd like to see. And I do love seeing your creations, so please tag me in any of my socials if you do post it, and don't forget to like and subscribe.